welcome to the Labor Force Podcast. Stories of the working class in a time of renewed labor militancy and awareness that capitalism is a rotten deal. I'm your host, Mike Strukin, proud member of New York State United Teachers. Greetings, all. Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, you already feel this Iran conflict in your capitalized bones. Meanwhile, as working people are watching prices climb, the folks running the economy are telling you very clearly where you rank, and it's not high. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett, a slimy sycophant as you might expect, went on TV to talk about the economic impact of the war with Iran, and he said something that honestly should be getting wall-to-wall coverage.
When you math out the possibilities within your own group about the economy and this impact here, and you say it's going to end sometime soon, what does that look like? Do you say 10 days is one version, 30 days is another, 60 days is another, or are you on a different timeline completely?
Well, again, what we work off of is, first of all, what the president has said, which is that it's a 4 to 6 week program, and we're ahead of schedule, and we're in the third week. And so then you could say, call that a base case. But of course, I get paid to worry. It's my job here in the White House. And then you think about, well, what if it's a little slower? We don't have much simulating to do if it's faster than that. But if it's a little bit slower, what happens then? But the fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
The last concern. Think about that. You, the person commuting to work, trying to afford groceries, juggling bills, that's the last concern. Now, to be clear, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This war has already sent energy prices surging. Gas prices are climbing toward $4 a gallon. Diesel is spiking even higher. And that ripples through everything: food, shipping, rents, all of it. And why? Because when you destabilize a region that controls a huge chunk of the world's oil supply, like the Strait of Hormuz, you don't just get headlines, you get price shocks. But here's where it gets revealing. Hassett isn't saying the economy is collapsing. In fact, he's saying the opposite, that the economy is fundamentally sound. And that's the key. Because when they say the economy is strong, what they really mean is corporate profits are fine, markets are holding, the system is working for the people it's designed to work for. Your pain, that's collateral damage, and they're not even pretending otherwise. Now, politically, this has already sparked backlash. Lawmakers are pointing out that Americans are paying the price, literally, for a war they didn't vote on and can't control. But let's zoom out, because this is bigger than one quote. This is about how decisions get made in this country. We're told that foreign policy is about national security, about stability, about protecting democracy. But when the consequences hit working people, when gas jumps, when groceries rise, when your paycheck stretches thinner, the response from the top is basically, yeah, we'll think about that later. Maybe. If it keeps going, that tells you everything. Because in a system that actually centered workers, consumer pain wouldn't be the last concern. It would be the first. Instead, what we're seeing is a familiar pattern. War first, market second, people last. And if you're wondering why so many people feel disconnected from politics, why trust keeps collapsing, this is it. They're telling you in plain language that your cost of living is not the priority. And the question isn't whether they meant to say it. The question is, how often do they think it and just don't say it out loud? And just to pile on, a recent CBS News report highlights that a typical U.S. family now needs about $145,000 a year to truly get ahead. Yet roughly half of Americans fall short of that benchmark. The study suggests many people feel stuck in what one expert described as a hamster wheel economy, where rising costs outpace income growth, making financial progress difficult even for working households. This gap reflects a broader trend in which the cost of achieving stability and upward mobility continues to climb faster than wages, leaving a major portion of Americans unable to reach what is considered a comfortable or secure standard of living. Oh, so only $145,000 to get ahead? That's it? Good to know you're not broke because the system's rigged, you're just underachieving. And you have to love the idea of the hamster wheel economy, because it really captures the part where you're running nonstop just to afford groceries, rent, and the occasional minor emergency that somehow costs a month's pay. But sure, Let's tell you more about how you'd be thriving if you just worked a little harder, budgeted a little tighter, skipped a few more luxuries, like going to the doctor or fixing your car. Half the country can't reach this magic number, but we're still supposed to believe this is all normal, that this is what a healthy economy looks like. Feels less like falling behind and more like the finish line keeps moving, just fast enough to make sure we never get there. And the Florida Senate Bill 1296, passed by the Florida legislature, is being criticized as a union-busting measure aimed primarily at teacher unions. According to a report, the legislative session itself drew criticism for failing to address major issues. One critic said the session may go down as the least productive session in the state's history, noting lawmakers did not address property taxes, did nothing to bring down the cost of homeowners insurance, and ignored the millions of Floridians currently without health care. The bill targets public sector unions and was sponsored by Republican State Senator Jonathan Martin with support from the conservative Freedom Foundation. During a committee hearing, the group's Southern director said the foundation does not believe Florida workers should have the right to organize, even though that right is guaranteed in the state constitution. The organization has openly stated its goal is to weaken or eliminate public sector unions, arguing that, quote, government unions are a root cause of every growing national dysfunction in America. The legislation builds on an earlier law, SB 256, passed in 2023, which made it harder for public sector unions to collect dues and required at least 60% of members to pay dues to avoid decertification. After that law passed, the Freedom Foundation funded an effort to decertify the Miami-Dade Teachers Union, but teachers voted overwhelmingly to keep it, with 83% supporting the union. Across the state, 209 decertification votes were held after the law's passage, and in every case, teachers voted to keep their unions. In response to these outcomes, SB 1296 changes the rules for union recertification elections. Early versions would have required a union to win a majority of all employees in the bargaining unit, not just those who vote, but the bill was later amended to require at least 50% participation and then a majority vote among those participating. Even with the changes, critics argue the bill is designed to weaken unions after previous efforts to decertify them failed. The measure passed after a heated debate, though 3 Republican senators from Miami, Ana Maria Rodriguez, Alexis Cataliund, and Alina Garcia, broke with the governor and voted against it, saying it would harm workers already struggling economically. Andrew Spar, the president of the Florida Education Association, which represents teacher unions across the state, decried the bill's passing. Quote, I think it's unfortunate that lawmakers in the state of Florida have decided to stand with out-of-state billionaire-backed organizations rather than the people of the state of Florida, the workers of the state of Florida. Every day, workers in this state are struggling to pay their bills, to pay increasing rent costs and housing costs, and now soaring gas prices. All we ask for is a fair shot at the American dream. It seems like this bill's main goal is to take away the protections that we have at work and our ability, our constitutional right and freedom to come together and advocate through a union and have a contract that protects our families and us. And wouldn't you know, emails obtained through a public records request show that the Freedom Foundation provided talking points to a Florida Republican lawmaker ahead of debate on the bill. According to the emails, a lobbyist for the group sent materials to the office of Jenna Persons Malika one day before the bill's first committee hearing, writing, quote, here are some talking points on the 3 provisions that we care about, as well as the one-pager we're using to lobby in favor of the bill. Metadata showed the document had been created by a Freedom Foundation policy director. Rich Templin from the Florida AFL-CIO argued the records are proof positive that none of this, has anything to do with Florida, adding that the public employers have not asked for it, the public employees have not asked for it. He also criticized the broader political climate, saying, quote, Florida has become a billionaire's playground. Now we need the fight back. As reported by the Colorado Sun, thousands of union workers employed by the largest meatpacking company in the U.S. went on strike early Monday morning, calling for higher wages and safer working conditions at the GBS facility in Greeley. Before sunrise, with the temperature hovering around 20 degrees, hundreds of employees, some with blankets draped over their shoulders, walked a picket line carrying signs asking people not to patronize the company. The union, which represents 3,800 workers at the plant, has accused JBS of trying to squeeze more out of staff while reducing hours and creating an unsafe work environment. Kim Cordova, president of UFCW Local 7, said the plant has increased the speed of the production line, processing 420 animals per hour, up from 390. As well as higher wages, workers want reimbursement of protective gear, which can cost hundreds of dollars. Quote, this is a historic moment in time to see workers come out like this, Cordova said Monday morning while standing with workers on the picket line. It's a real showing of worker power. The union has filed a handful of complaints with the NLRB, alleging retaliation had changed the terms and conditions of employment by JBS, also known as Swift Beef Company. JBS spokesperson Nikki Richardson said the company has spent the past 8 months in discussions with union members over a new contract. Quote, over the past 8 months, JBS USA worked diligently to reach a balanced and responsible agreement with UFCW Local 7. Instead of continuing constructive dialogue, the union abruptly ended negotiations and unilaterally canceled the existing contract, Richardson said in a statement released Monday. Their decision has created unnecessary disruption for team members who are never given the chance to review or vote on the company's proposal. Haven't we heard that one before? Cordova said JBS's proposal to raise wages by 60 cents an hour in the first year and 30 cents annually for the next 2 years is similar to a national agreement the company made with unions in other states last year, but that it does not cover Colorado's higher cost of living. Quote, JBS is trying to force us to take the national agreement, she said, but the healthcare costs increased 22 cents an hour, so those folks got an 8-cent increase. That's not going to work for us. This is the first strike for the meatpacking industry since the national level one occurred at Hormel Foods in Minnesota in 1985. JBS employees have been working on an extension of the expired contract since July and gave a 7-day notice that they plan to strike. We've said we don't want to bargain against ourselves, Cordova said Monday morning. Our goal here is to reach an agreement. So unless they want this kind of disruption for our economy here in Colorado, they should. Headquartered in Greeley, JBS USA has 132 processing facilities, 109,000 employees, and operates in 9 countries according to its website. In Greeley, workers process cattle into cuts of meat that end up on dinner tables nationwide. JBS, also known as Swift Beef Company, is one of the biggest beef processors in the country.
3,800 workers just walked off the job at one of the largest beef plants in the U.S., owned by JBS, which is the largest meatpacking corporation in the world and has a history of corruption and abuses.
This is a historic moment in time. There has not been a packing strike like this since 1985.
Union power! Number one!
99% voted to strike.
The number one thing that we're striking for is our safety, especially when we work with dangerous equipment.
Yo trabajo para el lado de Matanza. Tenemos que usar mucha agua caliente. Si un guante está roto y una persona esteriliza sus cuchillos, automáticamente le va a entrar el agua, se va a quemar un dedo.
They don't like to report the injuries to OSHA, and they try to handle it in-house. And the last option is to send them to a hospital because then it gets reported to OSHA.
It's been 8 months since their last contract expired and nearly a year since negotiations began. But UFCW members in Greeley, Colorado say JBS has engaged in bad faith negotiations and regressive bargaining.
For me, I'm striking to let them know we have a voice. It's more than the money. It's for our rights as human beings.
One of the biggest claims is that management often refuses to replace faulty and damaged equipment. And when they do, they'll take the money to buy that gear out of employee paychecks. When it comes to raises, JBS is only offering a 2% wage increase.
You pay cheap, you get cheap labor.
Some of the harshest working and living conditions are faced by immigrant workers at JBS. Many are not even provided with translators for workplace and safety trainings. One of the most shocking claims to come out against JBS has been human trafficking allegations by Haitian and West African workers who have reported deceitful recruitment tactics.
Workers were recruited off of TikTok, and those workers had come to the union and had complained about being charged fees or promised money or places to live by the company if they came to work for JBS. And then the promises were not kept.
These allegations are all less surprising when looking at JBS's long record of abuses, environmental harms, and unfair labor practices. But JBS has a friend in the White House, and they're feeling emboldened. The company was the biggest donor to Trump's 2024 inauguration fund, and just a few months later, they were approved to go public on the New York Stock Exchange.
Us striking JBS, it's pretty big. It's kind of nerve-wracking, you know, but this is the people standing up and speaking up for themselves.
I'll never forget in my life about how courageous these workers were.
Esto yo nunca lo había vivido, nunca lo había mirado, pero en este momento la gente está unida a defender sus mismos derechos.
And after more than a year of contentious bargaining, the WNBA and its players' union reached a verbal agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement following marathon negotiations that stretched past 2 a.m. Wednesday, marking what players called a major turning point for the league. The deal, which still requires formal approval, is expected to be transformational and will, for the first time, tie player salaries to league revenue, with average compensation projected to exceed $500,000, while also improving benefits like family planning and parental leave. Despite earlier fears of disruption, the league confirmed the season will begin on schedule, with Union President Nanika Ogwumike calling it historical for women's sports, and emphasizing that we're just really grateful to be able to come to a deal. The negotiations have been stalled over revenue sharing, salary cap increases, and benefits, as players push to be paid more fairly amid the league's growing popularity, rallying around the demand to pay us what you owe us, while Breanna Stewart said the final agreement will help create a system where everybody is getting exactly what they deserve and more.
Seattle stormed forward, and the president of the Women's National Basketball Players Association, that's Nneka Ogwumike, says salaries will reflect, quote, truly meaningful share of league revenue and raise the professional standard across the league. And, ladies and gentlemen, here she is joining us now from New York City to discuss. Nneka, good morning. I understand that the average salary for players will jump from, I think it's estimated to be about $150,000 a year to potentially $500,000 a year. How excited are you about the potential of this agreement?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I mean, this is an agreement that is truly changing the lives of many players, those, of course, that play in the league, but the future that is also incoming. And quite frankly, we were also able to add value to those players who helped build this league with some types of payments that are well overdue. It's so incredibly important for us to be present in this moment and be excited about what we've been able to achieve.
Now, I love when we see women making more money, but Nneka, I am going to give you an opportunity to respond to the naysayers about this, because a lot of people will say, well, look, the league, the WNBA isn't profitable. It's subsidized by the NBA. And if you're paying out all this money, how are you going to have these teams and the league grow to that point with profitability? So what's your response to that?
Well, I mean, I would hope that the announcement of this verbal agreement, as we continue to finalize the term sheet to present to Board of Governors and also to players, turns those naysayers into believers. Quite frankly, we wouldn't be having a league that isn't profitable if owners weren't clamoring and biting at the chomp to pay $250 million to own these teams, as we see expansion in half of this deal that we'll be experiencing.
Now, we know that Caitlin Clark has been a new star for the WNBA. The Indiana Fever had 9 of the 10 most watched matchups across ESPN networks last year, and that included a record-breaking 2.7 million viewers last May. I'm telling you something you already know, but did this help you make your case? What got you across the finish line in the end?
I think what got us across the finish line were the demands of the players. We have so many amazing player leadership members who were telling us days on end, weeks on end, exactly what it is that they wanted to fight for. The majority of these players, quite frankly, are the reason why we were able to get these things across the finish line. And, I really love to kind of take notice of not just incoming stars like Caitlin, like Angel, like Asia, being able to come in here and garner fan support in ways that we haven't experienced before. The game that we play, people love. We're very true to the game of basketball in the way that fundamentals are truly coveted today. But then, we're not here without standing on the shoulders of the giants that built this league. And so it's not any one person that got us there. And I can say that myself, even as someone who is the representative of these players, it is not only me by all means. And we should approach it that way, because we're existing as a league and we're performing as a league and growing as a union because of a collective. And that's always going to be the case.
Moving on to games of a different sort, at the 2026 Game Developers Conference last week, rebranded as a Festival of Gaming, organizers with the United Video Game Workers CWA Local 9433 continued pushing unionization in an industry facing layoffs, corporate consolidation, and technological disruption, even as conditions have worsened since the previous year's optimism. The union, described as a direct join organization, aims to give workers in a fragmented industry a pathway into organizing, and its launch previously drew strong enthusiasm, with membership quickly reaching triple digits and public demonstrations signaling growing labor momentum. However, that momentum exists alongside ongoing instability, with roughly 9,000 layoffs in the past year, rising console costs tied to tariffs, and increasing pressure from generative AI and immigration policies, all contributing to what's portrayed as a hostile environment for workers. Developers and members of the union marched through the conference last Wednesday. They also hosted a Game Worker Union Campaigns panel along with members of the ZeniMax QA Union and World of Warcraft Team Union, covering topics like how to organize within a studio and future plans of the UVW. The group of around 50 developers chanted, "Video games are worker-made, and Game Workers United will never be defeated." Out at Yerba Buena, Organize shared a first draft of their Bill of Rights, a set of universal protections that it plans to help shop unions like the ones at Blizzard and ZeniMax bargain for and even use as a template for new unions or freelancers to advocate for themselves. Suggested protections in the Bill of Rights handed out include protections from AI use being required by companies or used as a replacement for workers, anti-crunch policies, and protections for remote workers. It also suggests protections for workers in the U.S. who are immigrants and could be targeted by ICE agents. And in the final update, here's a heartwarming story about capitalism courtesy of CBS News.
A Ring camera in Manchester, Tennessee captured the delivery. An older man slowly climbing the steps. His name is Richard, and Brittany Smith, the homeowner, saw the video and decided she wanted to find him.
He should be at home just chilling, exercising a couple times a day to to keep his mobility, but working, no. I don't know, we need to help him.
Brittany almost never checks her Ring camera, but on that day her ex-husband, who is a quadriplegic, had sent their daughter a Starbucks treat. When Brittany watched the 78-year-old man make the delivery, she couldn't shake what she saw.
I was furious. I was like, I know this poor old man is not bringing my very able daughter Starbucks. What?
She sent the video to her ex, and they had the same thought. We need to find him. So Brittany posted the video online, and someone recognized him and gave her Richard's last name. So she drove around looking for the car that was in the video, and she found it. Richard lives just 5 minutes away, so she knocked on his door and handed him a $200 tip.
I needed to supplement our income, so I started working for DoorDash, and it allowed us to pay our bills.
Richard sold insurance and retired 13 years ago. But after his wife Brenda lost her job, he went back to work, delivering food, sometimes 12 hours a day.
With just one income in the family, you have to push.
1, 2.
At first, Brittany thought the tip was going to be enough, but people online had another idea.
Hundreds and thousands of messages begging me to start a GoFundMe for him, so I did.
She called it Give Richard a Chance to Rest Again, and boy did people show up. In 5 days, around $1 million was raised for Richard and Brenda, who have been married nearly 56 years.
It's just really difficult to believe that there's that many people that are that generous to try to help us. People that don't even know us.
Oh, and if you're wondering what Richard might do next, he says he wants to continue delivering, just not as hard and not as often as he used to. But he says working, it makes him feel better.
It's important to do the best you can and help people. If you help people and do right, you'll succeed.
You're a very knowledgeable man, Richard.
It took just one person to notice, and a lot of people showed up. Richard said what Brittany did is taking a lot of pressure off of us and making life livable once again.
Yeah, it's a heartwarming story, and thanks to the people that helped this guy out, of course. But that fucking says a lot about our system, does it not? It definitely does. So AI got pitched to workers as this liberation story, right? The boring stuff gets automated, the tedious paperwork gets handled, and people get more room to think, breathe, maybe even leave work on time. That's the sales pitch. Less drudgery, more freedom. But what we're getting a lot of the time looks more like the opposite. A recent futurism piece pulled together some findings that are worth sitting with. ActiveTrack looked at data from more than 164,000 workers. Big sample. And what they found was not some clean story where AI quietly removes toil and everybody benefits. They found people spending more time in email than chat, more time bouncing between business software, and less time in focused work. In their numbers, business application use jumped 94%. Focus time dropped 9%. That's not a picture of work getting simpler. That's a picture of work getting more crowded. And that's the thing that management consultants and tech evangelists always try to slide past. Even when a tool really does make one task faster, that does not automatically mean the worker gets relief. It can just mean the boss discovers a new excuse to demand more output, faster turnaround, more tickets closed, more campaigns launched, more reports filed, more little check-ins because now, supposedly, everything should happen instantly. So the core question is not, does AI increase productivity? Maybe sometimes it does. The real question is, who gets the gain? If a worker saves an hour, does that hour come back as rest, breathing room, shorter hours, maybe fewer pointless tasks? Or does management just seize it and stuff the day with more labor? Because the ActiveTrack findings point in a pretty familiar direction. More communication load, more software overhead, less concentrated time. Anybody who's done office work in the last decade knows this feeling already. You're not doing one job. You're doing the job, plus the chat app, plus the email chain, plus the project tracker, plus the dashboard, plus the AI tool, plus proving to 3 layers of management that all of that is happening. That isn't efficiency from the worker's point of view. That's labor intensification. Now, ActiveTrack also reportedly found a kind of sweet spot with AI use, something like 7 to 10% of the workday. Beyond that, gains can flatten out or get messy. And average time spent using AI apparently grew 8-fold over 2 years. So workers are being drawn deeper into these systems pretty fast. But even if there is some narrow zone where AI helps, that still doesn't answer the political question. A gain for whom? A smoother process for whom? If the answer is shareholders, executives, and managers chasing tighter control over labor, then productivity is just the polite word for getting more out of people. Again, same old story, new software. Harvard Business Review has written about this dynamic too, and I think they put a finger on something important. When a tool lets you do work faster, workplaces often respond by raising expectations, not lowering effort. Raising expectations. That's the trick. The task doesn't disappear, the quota expands. The inbox fills to match the new capacity. The pace gets normalized upward, and then very quickly, what looked like a productivity benefit turns into the new baseline. That's workload creep, and it doesn't just mean more tasks. It means denser tasks, more things jammed into the same hour, more fragmented attention, more supervision, more checking, more correcting. In a lot of cases, AI doesn't replace labor so much as rearrange it. Workers stop being the person directly producing every line and become the person who prompts, reviews, verifies, edits, and fixes, which is still labor. Sometimes it's worse labor. You can hear this especially clearly from software engineers talking about AI coding tools. The complaint isn't just, this thing makes mistakes. It's that the job can start to feel like being a nonstop reviewer of machine output. You spend the day switching context, generate, inspect, patch, test, backtrack, compare, rewrite. And context switching is exhausting. It's not glamorous cognitive work, it's mental whiplash. There's a hidden ideology in the AI hype that says review work is somehow lighter than original work. I'm not convinced. Anybody who's had to quality check sloppy output knows that hunting for errors can fry your brain. You're staying vigilant all the time because the machine can be plausible without being right. So now you're responsible for speed and accuracy at once, under conditions that make both harder. And this is where the broader white-collar experience comes in. A lot of office work was already defined by interruption, overload, and low-grade panic before generative AI showed up. AI can slot right into that structure and intensify it. More tabs open, more drafts to assess, more channels lighting up, less sustained thought, less ownership of the process, more pressure to act like the machine has made everything frictionless, when in practice, it may have just shifted the friction onto the worker's nervous system. I mean, call it brain fry, cognitive overload, whatever you want. People know the sensation. End of the day, you've touched 100 things and completed none of them in a satisfying way. And there's another risk here, one workers themselves have raised: skilled atrophy. If your role becomes approving, nudging, and correcting auto-generated work, what happens to the underlying craft over time? I don't want to overstate that, but it's a real concern. A labor process built around machine suggestions can leave workers carrying the liability while losing the autonomy that builds expertise. So nope, the hidden labor of supervising AI is not some minor footnote, it may be the whole story. This is why AI at work can't be treated as just a neutral innovation story. Technology doesn't arrive in a vacuum. It lands inside a power relationship. In a workplace where management has the unilateral right to set pace, monitor output, redefine jobs, and capture the savings, AI is very likely to become one more tool for speed up, surveillance, and tighter control. And let's be honest about that word, control. More software use doesn't just mean more support. It can also mean more traceability, more metrics, more managerial visibility into every click, every response time, every little gap in activity. So workers get sold convenience and then handed a machine for intensifying supervision. That's not an accident, that's a labor regime. If workers are going to live with these tools, then there have to be demands. First, transparency. What systems are being introduced? What do they actually do? What data are they collecting? How are outputs measured? Second, workload limits. If AI speeds up one part of the process, management should not have an automatic right to pile on more tasks. There need to be enforceable boundaries on pace and volume. Third, bargaining over implementation. Workers should have a say before these systems get dropped into the workflow, not after the damage is done. How is the tool used? For which tasks? With what review standard? With what staffing level? Those are labor questions, not just technical questions. And fourth, probably most important, workers should own the productivity gains. If AI actually saves time, that should mean shorter hours, higher pay, more staffing stability, or less drudgery, not just a nicer quarterly report for management. Because otherwise, the pattern is obvious. Workers absorb the disruption, the monitoring, the constant context switching, the burnout risk, the de-skilling risk, and management pockets the benefit. That's not modernization, that's expropriation with a sleek interface. A left labor politics of AI starts from a simple principle. The point of technology should be to reduce toil, shorten the workday, cut the garbage work, give people more control over their time and attention. If a tool does the opposite, if it makes the day more frantic, more managed, more fragmented, then workers have every reason to resist how it's being deployed. The future of work is not going to be decided by the tool alone. It's going to be decided by who has power over the labor process. And if we want a world where technology actually serves human beings, workers have to be in charge of the terms. Now let's circle back to why that's so important, given the system in which we live, work, and try to survive. Richard Bookstaber isn't just some talking head trying to scare people. He warned about the 2008 crash before it happened, lived through it from both the hedge fund world and inside the Treasury. And now he's saying what's building today could be even worse. Not because one obvious thing is about to blow up, and not because he knows the exact trigger. What he's saying is more unsettling than that. The whole system is wired together so tightly that when something goes wrong in one spot, it doesn't stay there. It spreads fast, through markets, loans, infrastructure, even politics, faster than the people in charge can get it under control. That matters because most coverage still treats risk like it's all separate. Private credit over here, AI stocks over there, global tension somewhere else. But his point is these aren't separate stories. They're different doors in the same house. And if the wiring is bad, it doesn't matter which room the fire starts in. One big part of that wiring is private credit. After 2008, regular banks pulled back from certain kinds of loans. New rules came in, balance sheets changed, and a lot of lending moved out of banks and into big institutional players, pension funds, insurance companies, private funds, asset managers. That market is now around $2 trillion. The problem is it's hard to see inside it. These loans aren't traded on open markets, and they don't change hands much. So when things get shaky, nobody really knows what they're worth, and they might suddenly realize it's a lot harder to sell them than they thought. That's basically the 2008 lesson, just updated. It's not just about risky bets or too much borrowing. It's about a system that looks solid when things are calm, but turns fragile when everyone needs cash at the same time. And there are already early warning signs. Investors getting nervous about private credit funds at big firms, especially with higher interest rates and a lot of these loans tied to tech and software companies that AI itself could disrupt. And here's where workers come in, because this is the part financial coverage usually ignores. When the system breaks, the people at the top don't take the first hit, workers do. Layoffs come first, hiring freezes, wages get squeezed, public budgets get cut, pension funds take losses, retirement accounts shrink, rent goes up as landlords try to cover losses, People lose homes when jobs disappear. And then the same people who help build this fragile system start saying everyone needs to tighten their belts. We've seen that before. Finance gets treated like some technical game, but the damage shows up in workplaces, schools, hospitals, transit, and household budgets. So when someone who lived through 2008 says the real danger now is everything spreading at once, not one bad sector, but a chain reaction, that's a warning about who's going to be asked to pay when things go south. His second big point is that the AI boom and private credit aren't separate. They're feeding into each other. Start with the stock market. 10 companies now make up more than a third of the S&P 500. That kind of concentration is risky by itself. It means the whole market, and a lot of retirement savings, depends on a tiny group of giant tech companies. What looks like a broad market is really a narrow bet. And that narrow bet is backed by real power. The hype around AI has poured money and influence into a handful of companies big enough to shape everything from electricity demand to chip supply chains to cloud systems to jobs. When those companies are doing well, it's called innovation. When they start to stumble, suddenly everyone realizes how much of the economy and how many workers' futures were tied up in them all along. Now bring private credit into it. On one side, it's funding companies that might struggle because of AI, like some software firms Bookstaber points to. If investors start thinking those companies can't keep up, the loans behind private credit funds start to look shaky. On the other side, private credit is also helping pay for the AI boom itself, data centers, chips, all the physical build-out. So the same system is exposed, both to companies being hurt by AI and to the expensive infrastructure driving it. That's where things can snowball. If investors in private credit get nervous and need cash, they can't easily sell those loans. There's no simple market for them, so they sell what they can sell fast, and that usually means big, publicly traded tech stocks, the same companies holding up the stock market. That's the chain reaction he's warning about. Trouble in these hard-to-sell private assets spilling over into the very stocks most people's retirement depends on. That's the part people really need to sit with. We hear a lot about diversification, but if the same money and the same big investors are tying all these pieces together, then diversification can end up being more illusion than reality. Different labels, same system underneath. And again, for workers, this isn't abstract. Pension funds and retirement accounts are tied to the stock market. Public jobs depend on tax revenue that rises and falls with market booms. Entire communities get reshaped around things like data centers and infrastructure tied to this growth. When investors pull back or dump stocks, the people who never had a say in any of it still take the hit. So the real question isn't whether AI is making money. It clearly is. The question is who takes the losses when this whole setup starts cracking. The most important part of his warning might be the shift from just financial risk to physical risk. In 2008, the crisis was mostly about financial risk tied to housing. Now finance is deeply tied into real-world systems, power grids, water, land, supply chains. That changes everything. Markets can bounce back, but if a power grid fails, or shipping gets blocked, or there's a drought, or chip supplies dry up, that hits the real world first, and markets react after the damage is already happening. He points to places like Iran and Taiwan as examples. Conflict involving Iran is spiking energy prices and limiting supply, which directly affects electricity, and that matters a lot for data centers and AI, which use huge amounts of power. If China moved on Taiwan, access to advanced chips could get cut off fast, slowing AI development and hitting the companies driving the boom. That shock would then ripple back into stocks and private credit. The problem is most financial models don't really account for this kind of thing. They're built to track prices and trends, not physical breakdowns like a failing grid or a disrupted supply chain, at least not until it's already showing up in the numbers. By then, it's too late. Everything might look fine on paper while the real foundation is already cracking. And for workers, physical shocks hit even harder than financial ones. First through everyday life, higher utility bills, shortages, job cuts. Then again through the financial side, retirement losses, pressure on pensions, budget cuts, wage stagnation, even foreclosures. It's a double hit and it lands all at once. So what's the takeaway? It's not that we should panic every time the market looks shaky, and it's not that workers need to become financial experts. It's that we can't rely on the same people who profit from the system to fix it when it breaks. If everything is disconnected, then we need more public control over essential systems, stronger protections for workers during downturns, real transparency in these shadow lending markets, and a serious effort to reduce the power of speculative finance before it dumps another crisis on everyone else. Wall Street usually doesn't admit there's a crisis until after workers have already lost jobs, pensions have taken hits, and politicians are already talking about cuts. So pay attention earlier than that. The warning sign isn't just stocks going down. It's a system that's so concentrated, so hard to see into, and so tied to real-world pressure points that regular people will be asked to carry the damage long before the people at the top admit anything is wrong. Well, that does it for this episode. If you like what you hear, give a rate or review on your favorite podcast app to help me grow. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with over 200 labor shows you can check out at laborradionetwork.org. This has been the Labor Force Podcast. I'm Mike Strukin. Solidarity, always.